Let's take a look at our fire bucket from last lesson. Now this bucket has been created and given a name, fire, but it is currently empty. If this were a variable, it would have been declared with an identifier. It may have been given a data type depending on your language, but it is still currently empty. We need to put something in the bucket so we can use it later. Let's assume we are going to fill our bucket with sand. If we were to write this in code, it would look something like this. The process of putting something in a bucket is called assignment. We refer to assigning a data value to a variable. In other words, the area of memory that we created and gave a name to now contains a value. In order to assign a value to a variable, we use the equal symbol, just like in maths, except from here it means put something in the bucket. To assign a value to a variable in Python, we would write the following. This line of code does the following 4 things. Creates a variable in memory, declare, gives it a name called myFirstVariable, identifier, works out that its kind of data it will store is a string, data type, and puts the value Dan into the variable, assign. Sometimes you might need to create areas of memory that store a data value that does not change. A constant is like a type of variable whose value cannot change. It still requires you to declare it, give it an identifier, and give it a data type. It's just that once you assign its value, you can't change it. Let's pretend we're writing a program to store information about a car. The car will have a make, for example, Ford. If we were to create this as a string variable in AQA pseudocode, we would write this. This works fine. However, the issue is that we have created this as a variable, so technically this value can change. The fact is though that the make will never change for this car. It can never spontaneously become a Nissan or a Volvo or a BMW. It will always be a Ford. Instead, it would be much more sensible to use a constant. To write a constant in AQA pseudocode, we would use the following code. You can see how similar to a variable that is. The only difference is the constant keyword at the beginning. You may notice that the name of the constant is in all capital letters. That's not a requirement, but is a common programming convention. However, it is worth noting that in fact Python does not have the capacity for creating constants. Instead, you simply give the variable's name written in capitals and hope your programmers do not change the value. If constants never change their value, why use a constant at all? Why not just write the number or text you want to use? When we just write the value, this is called a literal. Well, let's look at an example with the following code written in AQA pseudocode. This code is designed to calculate the final price of a product after VAT has been added to it. The current rate of VAT is 20%. You can see we've written the literal number 20 in our code to represent this. But why is this an issue? Well, what if at a later point the rate of VAT reduced down to 17.5%? We would need to go into our program and edit our code to the following. That's okay if we used VAT in one place, but what if we're using 20 to represent VAT 1,000 times? We'd need to go through and edit every single instance that we've used the literal 20 to represent VAT. Instead, what a smart programmer would do is use a constant. This might look something like this. Now, if we ever need to change the VAT rate, this won't be a problem. We would only need to change the assigned value in the constant declaration. Then, wherever we used VAT in our program, it would be updated to the new value. We saw in a previous lesson, output is the process of getting data out of your program. Input is, as it says on the tin, the process of putting data into your program. Every time you log into your school computer, you are entering a username and password into your computer. A program will then check your username exists, and it will then check that your password is correct for your username. All of this requires you to input data into the login system. In Python, we could write this. Let's look at the Python code line by line. Firstly, we are going to declare a variable called username and output a message directing the user to input some data. Then, whatever the user types in will be stored in that variable. We are then going to print out a message as well as the contents of the username variable. If you were inputting a single item of data, you would put it into one variable. If you were inputting 2 items of data, you would need 2 separate variables, and so on. So, once a variable has been declared, it can be assigned a value. Assigning a value is putting a data value in the memory address of the variable. Constants are like variables, except for the data value stored does not change. Using constants makes your code more readable as you use the descriptive identifier. Using constants means that if you need to make changes, you do it in one place. Input is the process of putting data into your program. Any data that is input will need to be stored in its own variable. If you are inputting 2 items of data, you will need 2 variables to store each one.